Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump are heading to Iowa this week, separately, of course. The two 2024 GOP presidential nominees will be campaigning in the Hawkeye State, with DeSantis' visit scheduled from Tuesday to Wednesday and Trump arriving Thursday. DeSantis' first rally will be held at an evangelical church in West Des Moines, and Trump is set to arrive for a meeting with pastors on Thursday, News Nation reports. Twitter CEO Elon Musk responded to chatter about Ron DeSantis' Twitter 2024 campaign announcement last week. Musk tweeted on Friday, a lot of noise about Ron DeSantis announcing and discussing his presidential bid on this platform. But you know what isn't noise? Setting an all-time record for fundraising, worth considering for announcements in general.
That was in reply to a tweet from CBS Miami saying, quote, Governor DeSantis raises $8.2 million in first 24 hours after launching presidential campaign. However, readers added notes to Musk's own tweet saying that it is factually incorrect and Trump had raised $25 million in 2019. Even removing larger donors, it's still $14 million. Furthermore, half of Governor DeSantis' donations did come via a donor event that started just before in advance of the Twitter space. President Joe Biden actually raised $6.3 million, topping DeSantis' online donations. Also on the topic of 2024, a new Republican primary poll from McLaughlin and Associates has Donald Trump with 54% of the vote and DeSantis with 16%. In a head-to-head, Trump takes 69% and DeSantis takes 30%. So a reminder, always important, that DeSantis has a long way to go in terms of these poll numbers. That said, he is such a less well-known figure than Donald Trump. You could plausibly argue that he has room to grow.
You could argue it, but also you got to look at what's happening on the other side of the aisle with RFK Jr. polling by some accounts at 20%, an infinitely less known name than Ron DeSantis, who is a governor of one of the most popular newsmaking states in the country.
You think RFK Jr. is less well known than Ron DeSantis? I mean, he's a Kennedy.
The idea
people know those three
the idea
letters
of there
together.
being a Kennedy is, I think, very well known. The idea that there's an RFK Jr. out there that wants to run for president and has the kind of capacity, interest, ability to do so, any kind of legs under his campaign is a very different thing. And I think that it is very telling that the Democratic Party is unwilling to take RFK Jr. seriously at all, when in many ways Ron DeSantis is a creation of a media that is is benefiting, I should say, from a media that is very eager to have some real challenger to Donald Trump. And in Donald Trump's words, is a person who might not even be in the political discourse, but for his own intervention back in 2018.
That's an interesting. So I'm not sure I agree with that. I think probably neither of them are comparing RFK Jr. and Ron DeSantis. We're political people, so we can go through and name a lot of the senators and governors, et cetera. Most people, they know big names. They know who Joe Biden is. They know who Donald Trump is. They probably don't know who either person is. They know of the Kennedy family. Mm-hmm. I think DeSantis is just beginning to have his debut on the national stage.
Well, I can't wait to watch it. How do you think this shakeout, meetup or near miss in Iowa is going to shake out between these two? So
DeSantis is right now, his strategy is to be to Trump's right, particularly on COVID, kind of social issues, wokeness-ish stuff. I think he wants to court evangelicals. I think he wants to win over evangelicals. Say, look, Trump, I know he delivered for you, but he has questions about abortion, how far that's gone and everything. And you weren't ever really comfortable with him anyway, right? He's not a family person. Mm-hmm. I am. And then COVID for the more less religiously inclined Republican primary voters. I think that's the DeSantis strategy. You saw him talking. He was talking on a conservative news radio program over the weekend, DeSantis, saying that, and he laid out his strategy very clearly, saying I loved what Trump was doing in 2016, 2017, but it went off the rails, and then he really got rolled on COVID, and it's not the same person as it was back in 2016, and that's why I'm stepping up. Mm-hmm. That's his pitch, not Trump is a maniac. I hate him. You can't. That doesn't work for Republican primary voters. The pitch is that Trump himself wandered off the path of the MAGA policies that Trump outlined.
And do you think that's going to be effective? Because we saw after the Twitter launch in Donald Trump's statements, he tried to reclaim some of that COVID ground, pointing out that Ron DeSantis had closed down beaches and complied with some of those early COVID policies with everyone else. Now, you can make the case that he corrected course more quickly than other states, for sure. But Donald Trump doesn't seem to be afraid of getting right in there and making direct attacks on turf, which, as you described, Ron DeSantis perceives himself to be stronger on than Donald Trump.
As you've said, DeSantis needs to complete the trifecta by also, on foreign policy, matching the mood of the Republican primary voters on Ukraine. And you've been critical. I agree with you that he dodged that a little bit in the Twitter Spaces. He's done a better job, I think, on other occasions in spelling out, what his foreign policy would be.
Has he done a better job? Because we also watched that interview that he did on Fox News with Tragowdy after the Twitter Spaces, in which he was asked very directly about his feelings about the war in Ukraine, and he kind of deflected it into a conversation about what the real problem is the woke military.
He answered questions. I think maybe he submitted his answers to Tucker when Tucker was
before
grilling.
all of these
before
events.
This.
Well, that seems like a little bit of a backslide then, because he did get in trouble for trying to, I think, occupy some middle ground there. When he described Ukraine as a territorial dispute, he got a lot of pushback from the blob, as it were, from establishment members of both parties. And I think in this climate, people like RFK Jr., people like Donald Trump get a lot of respect historically, because even when they receive that kind of pushback, they stick the landing. It seems like Ron DeSantis dabbled in those waters, got the pushback, and immediately has retreated to a place where he's deflecting from any substantive questions about what he would do in Ukraine.
If he wants to inherit Trump's voters, he needs to have the perception of taking on the blob the way Trump clearly had that perception. I'm not sure reality ended up matching the rhetoric for Trump, but certainly Trump's speeches about how he's not going to listen to the military-industrial complex. I mean, he said that about Afghanistan and Iraq. He was not afraid to say Iraq was a total waste of time and we need to get out of Afghanistan, something most Republicans feel is the case, but you weren't allowed to say. You were afraid to say. That kind of boldness is what DeSantis needs. And he's still very stiff and very scripted. Again, I think he's much more comfortable talking about COVID, despite some of the things you've pointed out, and really that's where he gets the most favorable conservative media coverage.
Yeah, we'll see how this plays out in Iowa. I would want to not be followed immediately by Donald Trump. I think I would want to be the cleanup act and not the opener, but we'll see how that all plays out. A new article in the Washington Post writes that Biden's circle is seeking to boost Vice President Kamala Harris looking ahead to 2024. And this started with her role in the debt talks when President Biden sat in an Oval Office meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on May 16th to discuss the debt ceiling. Harris sat in between the two men. A couple days later, Harris was on a teleconference call with elected officials and leaders urging a deal to be reached.
Biden and his campaign team are reportedly confident that they can match Trump in 2024, but are aware of the fact that their challenger could be more difficult if Trump is not the nominee, according to Politico. Also, here's what President Biden had to say when asked about a president pardoning Trump.
Did you see that Ron DeSantis said that if he became president, he would pardon Trump? Where are you on the idea of presidents pardoning Trump?
Yep. It was. I find this whole thing a little bit rich. Every president who basically, I don't want to say every president, but basically every president in our lifetimes has plausibly, credibly been accused of committing any number of war crimes. And every subsequent president takes the line that they are not going to support any kind of move to hold them accountable legally, right? That is constructively supporting a baseline pardon for all presidents and their presidential behavior. Now, Donald Trump is being accused of doing things outside of the office, right? Kind of personal crimes that you could argue are separate
silly.
and apart. But the idea
you could also argue are insignificant compared to the war crimes.
100%. So this idea of scoffing and rolling your eyes and thinking that it's absurd or some huge dereliction of moral duty to pardon Trump, given the scale of the constructive pardons that every president has availed themselves of, it's a little rich for me.
Yeah, same. What do you make of the conviction the Biden White House seems to have that some non-Trump alternative, which realistically is just DeSantis, because it's going to be Trump or DeSantis, the DeSantis, I think you doubt a little bit that that Biden would have an easier time beating DeSantis than Trump? I'm
conflicted on it. I do think that there is this argument that Ron DeSantis is less polarizing, that he seems like a more normal kind of Republican. I think that was the argument that was pushed forward over the last couple of years as people have been looking forward to 2024. I think that Ron DeSantis's behavior, how forward he has been, how public he has been about the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, about all of these culture war issues. He went on Fox News over the weekend and said that he is campaigning on ending leftism in the United States of America. At this point in American history, I feel like many liberals are as galvanized by Ron DeSantis as they are by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has shown more moderation in his statements on abortion than Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis has really been kicking the beehive in a way that I think makes it no longer such a clear argument that he would have more Democrats staying home and have an easier time to the White House. And he's kind of created that own reality for himself by choosing this anti-woke lane, which is an explicit attack on liberals and leftists as human beings, as opposed to Donald Trump, who would flail around and say, we're going to build a wall. I'm making statements that are being perceived as anti-immigrant. I'm a protectionist. I'm an isolationist. Those kinds of things, but not so much. Hey, there's a group of Americans. I'm explicitly going to call them out. Donald Trump was the first pro-pride president who dances to YMCA and had a pride flag in events, and that's a significant contrast from Ron DeSantis.
I mean, there are liberals and even leftists who find aspects of, again, wokeness is such a broad categorization that find aspects of it annoying. DeSantis is going all in on this to win the Republican primary. If he does do that, then he'll pivot. He's not going to talk about those things anymore. He'll talk about, being a moderate, common sense things all Americans agree on, and just keep it out of schools, but you can do whatever you want, that kind of thing.
Right.
And we'll see if that's more palatable.
But you think he's going to be able to memory hole statements like, "My goal is to quote destroy leftism in America"? I mean, when President Biden said at the State of the Union.
He's not going to get many votes from leftists.
But wait a minute. When the Democrats rolled out MAGA Republicans as a phrase, Republicans went crazy saying you can't attack Republican Party, you can't go after voters like that. And I substantially agree with that. I think that you have to make sure your framing is attacking politicians and politics as opposed to the average voter who may or may not identify as a MAGA Republican. I similarly think saying coming out strong, you want to be the president of all America, but you're saying you want to destroy leftism in America is the kind of attack that is not going to keep people home.
I mean, Hillary called half of America her enemies, despicable.
I've written many articles about how that was inappropriate and part of her downfall.
DeSantis is calling out a specific ideology and one that I don't know. I don't know how he's defining it. Maybe you wouldn't even count as a leftist according to how he's defining it.
Well, he's going to have to defend the many plausible interpretations of that, and a lot of Americans, whether or not it's this statement or his behavior in terms of encouraging these kind of boycotts, now Target is the enemy, blah, 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 blah. Sure. It's getting into a place that is, I think, really off-putting to normies. And the whole point of his campaign was that he was supposed to be the more normie version of Trump. I don't know how that's going to go for him.
Well, he's got to get there first, and I would understand Biden's conviction that, they beat Trump once, so they're probably thinking they beat him once, they can do it again. However, it's hard not to think of the whole Hillary approach, which was we got to have Trump because we can beat him, and they didn't.
Yeah,
maybe would have beaten someone else, didn't beat Trump.
I think that Hillary and Trump were a unique matchup in terms of the fact that Hillary's vulnerabilities and his matched so well that she couldn't really make a clean attack on his kind of Wall Street ties and being a big New York fixture, a corrupt fixture, someone who has made some unsavory statements about race and been sued for discrimination and things like that in the past with her super predator comments. I'm not saying there's a tit-for-tat, one-for-one parallel between those two, but it was murky enough and they were both contemptible enough to the electorate that she wasn't the avatar that the country, the Democrats needed, people who didn't like Trump needed, to really land a solid blow.
All right, we got to go. We'll have more Rising right after this.